Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So today it is a continuation of yesterday's session. So yesterday we have just discussed in detail about the general aspects of epidemiology. So today I will brief you out about the methods of epidemiology, or what are the various types of epidemiological study designs. So among these study designs, if you see, so these epidemiological study designs are broadly categorized into two types. So one is, as we all know that epidemiological studies categorized into observational. Another one is experimental. Observational means where we go
Experimental.
and stand among the population and where we don't do any intervention. That means we won't do any, like we won't touch the subjects, we'll just observe the population or the subjects of our interest. Then we try to analyze what is the situation. So this observational, it is again of two types. So one is descriptive, another is analytical. Then again, experimental, again we have got randomized and non-randomized trials are there. So when we look into this observational, we have got descriptive. So to talk about this descriptive, it mainly describes any new disease or the condition which we are interested in terms of time, place, and person. So we do describe the disease in terms of time, place, and person. So for example, if I want to give you like many males, more males are affected with swine flu H1N1 in Mexico in 2009. So what does it mean? Here we are nicely describing this particular swine flu or H1N1. So in terms of like time. So when was it affected? 2009. Then place. Then which place? Mexico. Then person who are most commonly affected males. So when we try to describe the disease situation, then we call it as what? Descriptive epidemiology. And this descriptive epidemiology, it is a first line or whenever we want to study about any new disease. So it is basically intended like we want to study about the new disease. For example, like already we know many things about hypertension or diabetes mellitus, so we can open our some medicine textbooks and we can read about it. But when we want to study a new disease, so for example, we will take the present situation only. So COVID, like we don't know what is this. So as such, we don't know what are its clinical features, how it looks like, and how to identify and how to diagnose it, and how to confirm it. Also, all these things we don't know. Now, how did we come to know that these are the now clinical features of COVID? It's like because of the work of the descriptive epidemiology. Like we go and get into the population and we look at the people who are affected and we observe their signs and symptoms. Then we correlate and we try to do some diagnostic test. That time we try to come out with some assumptions, and these assumptions we call it as what? Hypothesis. So our descriptive epidemiology, it always ends with the what? Creation of the hypothesis. It is nothing but a statement or a supposition or an assumption that is created. Am I audible, students?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Akash, am I audible? Akash? Yeah. So now what happens is like in descriptive epidemiology, so this is what hypothesis create generation will be there. So at the end, like we study any particular new disease which is not known to us, anything which we want to study, so we study it in terms of time, place, and person. Then ultimately these three things we to make it together and create one statement, and that statement is called as hypothesis. Now this hypothesis has to be, now whichever is created has to be tested. Now this testing of the hypothesis will be done by means of analytical studies. Here we have got various types are there. One is case control studies, another is cohort studies, then we have got cross sectional studies, then we have got ecological studies. So these are the different types of analytical studies. Once it is tested here hypothesis, then we want to confirm the hypothesis. So how do you do the confirmation? This is a last stage. So where we do the experiment or where we do the intervention and we try to confirm what are the hypotheses which we have generated in the descriptive study. Now coming to the descriptive study, so when we look at the time distribution, because already yesterday what we have discussed is like there are some diseases which has got cyclical or seasonal fluctuations. Like some diseases are more commonly seen in certain seasons. So, for example, malaria, dengue, all these are what vector-borne diseases. These vector-borne diseases they are most commonly seen in which season? Rainy season. That is in the month of June, July, August, and in the beginning of early winter. So this is the period when there will be more rise in number of this malaria and dengue and other vector-borne diseases, chikungunya and all. Why? Because of the rains, so it acts as a nice breeding site and what propagation of the mosquito and its population. So this is a season where these diseases are more common. And the most commonly asked MCQ question is in India, the most common Anopheles species which is related to rural malaria. So in rural areas, the malaria is most commonly caused by Anopheles facies. And wherever it is in urban area, the malaria is most commonly caused by Anopheles stephensi. So these names you have to just remember it. Then dengue. So this dengue is caused by which one? Mosquito that is vector is Aedes aegypti. What is the other name for this Aedes aegypti? Can anybody? What is the other name for this mosquito? It is called as tiger mosquito because there are some white color stripes that are seen on the legs or the joint legs and body of this particular mosquito. That's why it is called as tiger mosquito, and it is a causative agent for dengue. So these two, malaria, dengue, and other vector-borne diseases are more common in the which season? Rainy season. Next, coming to
Rainy
the
season.
diarrheal diseases. So what are these diarrheal diseases? They are like which one? Typhoid, rotavirus. Then again we have got polio. So all these are the examples for what? Diarrheal diseases. And these diarrheal diseases again they are feco-oral in nature. Their route of transmission is what? Feco-oral.
Rural road.
Because of this, they are more commonly seen or expected to rise more in rainy season. Except in diarrheal disease, the exception is what? Rotavirus. And this rotavirus, remember students, in examination they can ask you in India most common diarrheal disease. So please make a tick that it is rotavirus and it is most commonly seen in which season? Winter season. And rest of the other diarrheal disease they are most commonly seen in which season? It is common in rainy season. Next, coming to respiratory diseases. So, can you name some respiratory diseases? Akar, Smithy, mumps. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Mumps, measles,
COVID.
Measles.
mumps,
Then
measles, diphtheria, H1N1. So these are all the examples of what respiratory diseases. And these respiratory diseases are again more in the winter season. So some questions may be asked to you, like mumps is most commonly seen in which particular season. So again you have to opt the answer saying that it is in winter season. And why it is more common in winter season? Because the air pressure is less and it is more of dry in nature and particles will be suspended in the air for a longer period of time. So that is the reason why these respiratory diseases are more commonly seen in or more occurrence will be there in winter season. And very important MCQ question is like, what is the like particle size which is responsible for most of the spread of respiratory diseases? So the respiratory droplet size particle should be at least less than 5 microns. So if the particle size is less than 5 microns, then higher the chances of respiratory diseases. And another important question is, what is the minimum distance for transmission of respiratory diseases? What is the minimum distance? So here one fellow is there. Now another fellow is also standing here. Now can this fellow get this respiratory disease? We don't know, but we need to know how whether he will get or no. How we will come to know if there's a one arm distance. Just put your hands forward, and if that arm distance, if that fellow is standing, then again higher chances that he may get the respiratory infection. But the fellow is this fellow is standing somewhere here or somewhere here, then again the chances of getting the respiratory disease is lesser. So again the minimum distance required is how much? One arm distance. Next, what about this NCD, that is non-communicable diseases? Can you give example for this? diabetes mellitus,
Diabetes.
then
Hypertension.
hypertension, then cancer. So these are all
Cancer.
the examples of what non-communicable diseases. Now, do you think that diabetes mellitus has got any seasonal variation? No, it doesn't know any summer,
No,
any
no.
winter or spring season. It can happen anytime. So, like any moment or any millisecond, also it can show variations in our blood levels. So, all these biological parameters, which are non-communicable diseases, they have no time distribution. So students make sure that if the question is asked, identify which one of the following doesn't show any time distribution. So if any non-communicable disease is there, then make sure that you tick for that. And same thing holds true for HIV also. So this HIV, it is not like peculiar in some winter season or rainy season. No, it has got no particular time distribution till now what we have observed. So these are the two commonly asked MCQ question. Identify which among the following doesn't show any time distribution. So any non-communicable diseases and even HIV. Next, when we come to the place distribution, so students just see here. So some diseases are there. For example, Kala Azar. So Kala Azar, it is most commonly caused by the vector sandfly. And remember, in India, this particular Kala Azar is seen only in the four or the about five places or five states in India. So what are they? It is highest in Bihar, then Eastern UP, West Bengal, and Jharkhand. So these are the four states where this Kala Azar is seen. Why? And in other parts of India, if you come to Andhra Pradesh, and again if you come to Orissa or Karnataka, we don't find much of this Kala Azar. Why? Because this vector sandfly, that is phlebotomus, it is present most commonly in this Gangetic belt area. So that is the reason why there are more cases of Kala Azar seen especially in these four states of India. So if you come across any cases or the patients coming from Bihar, Eastern UP, West Bengal or Jharkhand, then you can expect that there are chances that he may be having Kala Azar. Next, what is this JE? That is Japanese encephalitis. This Japanese encephalitis is present all over India. If you look into India, no, so it is present all over India. But the thing is that it even shows a place distribution, even though it is present everywhere. But there are certain places where it is like maximum cases are reported. So, for example, like again, this Eastern UP, that is Gorakhpur. This Gorakhpur is called as hub, like maximum cases of Japanese encephalitis is seen over there. And again, when you come here, again West Bengal. So these are the two states in India where you can expect maximum cases of Japanese encephalitis. Then students, one more point I want to tell you that when you go for the treatment aspect, like when I talk about national health programs, there I'll discuss. Like whenever you do the treatment for this Japanese encephalitis, again some variation is there. Because when we go to the northeast part of India, this part of India, the people already have developed resistance to certain drugs which are recommended for use for Japanese encephalitis. So this I will tell you in the rest of the National Health Program lectures. So you should know it is present everywhere in India, but the peak number of cases are seen in Gorakhpur. Hence, Gorakhpur is also called as hub of Japanese encephalitis, then West Bengal, and drug resistance for this Japanese encephalitis is most commonly seen in eastern states of India. Yes, are you all clear with this Japanese encephalitis?
Yes, ma'am.
Next, what is this KFD? Now we'll
Casanova
come
forest.
to, yeah, very good. Castor forest disease. It is again seen in which where Western Ghats, our Karnataka only, that Shimoga, all these places. I think recently also few months back we have heard that monkey fever. It is also called as monkey fever, and it is caused by a heart tick, that is Haemophysalis. So this tick will be there. Some worm it is arthropod. So it harbors this particular virus, and wherever it goes and bites the individual, so he'll be developing this Casno forest disease. So this particular disease is commonly seen in the Western Ghat area of which one? Karnataka. And students remember, so what is the vector for this heart tick? That is Haemophysalis. Then again, filariasis. For example, somebody comes from Mangalore or Orissa. Then again, which one? Vishakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh. So do you think that students, these areas, filariasis cases will be more?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am. Coastal.
more because filariasis peculiarity is that the vector whatever is a Culex patagans, this particular vector is commonly seen in the peninsular part of the India. So what is the peninsular part of the India? That is, it starts from Gujarat, then Karnataka, then after that what is there? Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, West Bengal. So all this part, if we know the political map of the or geographical map of India, so all this part we call it as what? Peninsular India. So wherever this coastal area is there, the sea, so that area filariasis cases will be more because there this particular vector is commonly seen. Then when we come to HIV, so students, do you think that HIV is present all over India or it is present only few places?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, HIV is present all over India, but when we see more scientifically, so the government has categorized the HIV into three areas. So it is like highly prevalent HIV areas. So in that it comes Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. This thing we need to focus Mizoram and Nagaland. So these are the seven places in India or states where it is called as like high prevalent zones for HIV. So any individual coming from these any of the seven places, he has got high chances of having HIV. But when we go to like Jammu Kashmir or other central parts of India, do you think HIV cases are more prevalent? No. This is what we have observed.
Hmm.
The epidemiology, in descriptive epidemiology, the observations were found to be like it is most common in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Mizoram, and Nagaland. This seven number is very important because in examination again it can be asked highly HIV prevalent areas, moderately HIV prevalent areas, and low prevalent HIV areas. All this low prevalent occupies the upper section of India. Yes. Now, when we see globally, worldwide, if you see HIV is most commonly seen in South Africa, Nigeria, and India. So, whoever goes to the South Africa or Nigeria or some international travel is to our country only, then more chances that that fellow may contact this HIV and he may develop AIDS. So, this is what we have to know. These are the high risk areas. And if you go to Gujarat, what is more common, students? Gujarat, what is more
Diabetes,
common over there?
diabetes mellitus.
Diabetes mellitus, very good. And if you go to which one, West Bengal, Bihar, or Jharkhand, so what is more common over there? Kala Azar.
Kala-Azar.
So if you are like destined to go and work and settle in that places, then we have to be like careful that chances are that we may get this particular problem. Then when we look at hypertension, it is more commonly seen in urban section of the India. So these are the most potentially asked questions. That's why I have mentioned it here. Next, students, just look at here new diseases. This is what our government books it mentions, Government of India. So it has listed that in India, these are the new diseases, like for example, H1N1. So it is most commonly seen in metro cities where international traveling facilities are there. That is where international airports are there, like Delhi, New Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, Ahmedabad. So wherever like lot of international travels occur, so these economic hub areas are most commonly affected with what? H1N1, that is swine flu. So remember this metro cities with swine flu. So if you go there, higher chances of having this particular H1N1. Next one, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, that is CCHF. If this CCHF is asked, just close your eyes and mark that at present it is there in Gujarat. So because there this particular fellow, Hyeloma, this vector is there, no? This vector, this tick or this vector is present in the like thick forest areas of this Gujarat. Now this tick when it goes and bites a human, no, then human may get in contact with the virus and they may develop this Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. So exclusively now it is seen only in Gujarat. Just note down this point. Then next one is lychee virus. Now students, what it has been observed is that in Bihar, is have you all heard about the lychee fruit? Students, have you heard about lychee fruit?
Yes, ma'am.
So now what happens?
Yes,
Malnourished
ma'am.
children, so when they ate, When they ate this lychee fruit, then what happened? They died. They died. And especially when they ate this lychee fruit in the empty stomach. This is very important. Empty stomach, then suddenly they died due to hypoglycemia. So we don't know the exact cause for that, but an assumption is that maybe due to release of some chemicals. So because of that the death has occurred. So in exact pathophysiology, if you want to see other lectures, we have to listen to that. So this is again most commonly observed in where? Bihar. So in Bihar, the most commonly occurred new disease is what? Lychee virus disease, especially in malnourished children. And if they eat this particular fruit in the empty stomach, then over. It can happen for them. They can die also. Then Ebola. So it is first seen in New Delhi. Then again Zika virus. Again it is seen in Gujarat. Then what about this one Nipah virus? Nipah virus it is seen in Kerala. Then West Bengal. And what is the peculiarity of this Nipah virus? Whoever eats bat eaten fruits. So in these cases, this particular Nipah virus is seen. So whoever consumes this bat infected or bat eaten fruits, so for them this particular Nipah virus infection is commonly seen. After this place distribution, in descriptive epidemiology, the second part is person distribution. Like in person distribution, it is of two types. So we describe it in terms of age distribution, another is sex distribution. So age distribution, if you see, there are some diseases, example respiratory disease like measles, most commonly seen in 6 months old baby to 3 years old child. Yes, and why it is not seen below 6 months. Students, can you tell me why measles is not seen in children below 6 months? Because of presence of maternal antibodies. Because 0 to 6 months there will be maternal antibodies, and this gives protection against which one? Measles. Then again, when you see mumps and variola, that is varicella, that is chicken pox. Now what happens? These two are commonly seen in 5 to 9 years age group. So what is this 5 to 9 years? Am I audible, students?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
5 to 9 years is what? It is a school going age. Have you
Going.
anybody with this, mumps or chicken pox during your childhood days? Any
Yes,
of
ma'am.
you?
Yes, ma'am. I have got chicken
Yeah,
pox.
got it. Okay, fine. So this is like during the school days, this particular mumps or chicken pox, it is most commonly seen among the school going children, and the age group that is mentioned here is 5 to 9 years.
To nine.
Then next we see the polio. Yes, even it has got the age distribution. It is most commonly seen between 0 to 5 years age. That is why we give this OPV or IPV vaccinations due to cover within this stipulated age period. Otherwise, what happens? The chances of getting this polio infection is very high. Next,
Hmm.
neonatal tetanus.
Ma'am, it
What
is
is it?
in India, na? Polio.
What happens, Smriti?
Ma'am, polio is eradicated from India, na?
The polio, no, again, we have to very much specifically say that P2 strain of polio is eradicated. See, polio virus, it has got several strains. In that P1, P2, and P3 strains are there. In this, only P2 is eradicated, but still P1, P3 is there, for which cases are not seen because we are giving vaccination for that. So this
Hmm.
vaccination is building up the immunity for the individual. So that's why we are not seeing any cases. But P2, this strain itself is totally eradicated from in India. So if the question is asked,
The
polio.
trivalent vaccine is converted into divalent now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. The trivalent, earlier three strain vaccines we used to use. Now, since P2 is not there, so the WHO has recommended to create the vaccines from vaccines for P1 and P3 strains only. So just remove this P2 strain. So it has become bivalent. So the time when this
Bivalent.
bivalent vaccines came, no, that period we call it as what? Switch day. That is,
Which
we are
day?
switched from trivalent vaccination of polio to the bivalent vaccination. Okay. Now, what is the definition of neonate? Neonate. So it can be asked for you, neonate, infant, and all. So when do you call the individual is a neonate? That is 0 to 28 days. that is first 4 weeks after birth. They are called as what? Neonate. Now, this neonate, what happens? Again, the chances of getting the tetanus is very high, and this we call it as what? Neonatal tetanus, or it is also called as eighth day tetanus, because the death is very much sure that it can happen on the eighth day. So it is also called as eighth day tetanus or neonatal tetanus, and it is most commonly seen in which age period? 0 to 28 days, because
Yes.
this particular period we define them as neonate.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, then what about the diabetes mellitus? So diabetes mellitus, again, when we see, it is a non-communicable disease, and it is most commonly seen in the individuals who are above age group of 40 years. Then what about the cataract? It is an age-related problem, right? So age-related lens problem. Now it is most commonly seen in whom? Who are above 50 years
Let's
of age.
see.
So again, it can be asked for you. Then what about HIV? Even HIV shows what? Age distribution. It is most commonly among the individuals who are between 30 to 40 years. Now, can you
Mm,
tell me HIV shows a place distribution? Yes. HIV shows, does it show any sex distribution? Is it
uh,
more common in males or females? Do you think that it can show? No.
no.
Next, we'll see the sex distribution. Just try to understand the concepts here. So, there are something like breast cancer, lung cancer, oral cancer. Do you think all these three will show sex distribution? That is like, do you say that breast cancer is more common in females
Well,
than males?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can say. Then, what about lung cancer? It is more in males as
It is
compared
more
to females.
as compared
Then,
to female.
yeah, oral cancer
Yes,
more in
female
males as compared
than
to
female.
females. Now tell me what about the cervical cancer or prostate malignancy? So
More
cervical cancer
in
are more in
female than male.
fe- than males. Then Akash, what about this one?
More in
Prostate malignancy. Smriti Akash,
Males,
more
males.
in
more
males
in male in comparison to female.
than females. Now, what I say, no, this is wrong actually. You cannot say that cervical cancer is more in females or prostate cancer is more in males. No, because what you have to know is that cervical cancer or uterus cancer, because these are the anatomical organs which are present only in females. So, when we talk about sex distribution, we need to have a comparison that anatomical organ or that particular problem should happen in both males and females. Then we need to do the comparison. Now, do you think that uterus is present in the males? No, definitely no.
No,
Then a prostate, is it present in the females? No. That means what?
No.
There
no,
is no comparison available for us. So if we say that cervical cancer is more in females and males, it is definitely a wrong statement. We should never say that. Then what about this breast cancer? Do you think that it is right to say that breast cancer is more in females than males? Do you
no,
think
ma'am.
am I right with this or wrong with this?
Wrong, wrong.
No, I'm right, because breast is organ that is present in both males and females. But thing is that maybe 99 cases of breast cancer can happen in females when you look into 100 cases, and maybe one case can happen in males also. That means what? This organ is present anatomically, naturally in both the sexes, and when we can do even the comparison, so maybe chances to happen in males is less as compared to females. So breast cancer comparison is definitely possible. Whereas cervical cancer, uterine or fallopian tube, or whatever it is, and prostate malignancies or testicular malignancies, they are like only present in those particular sexes. So we call them as what? Sex restricted. Remember this term. Restricted distribution or sex restricted diseases also we can say. So give some examples of sex restricted diseases. So it is cervical cancer,
Right. Cancer.
uterine cancer. So all these are what examples for sex restricted. Then for example, thyroid problems like thyroid goiter is more common in which one? Hyper, for example, we may say that it is more in females as compared to that of the males, because thyroid is present both in males and females, but when we do the comparison, it is more in females. So remember, sex distribution comparison is very, very important. Then, when we look at the respiratory diseases, can we say that it is more in like measles, mumps, where this one, chicken pox, H1N1, all these are more common in males and females? No, it is
No,
equal
ma'am.
in males and females. Remember this point, because this respiratory air particle, it doesn't see that I should enter only female body or male body, nothing. This particles can enter into any of the sexes. So no sex distribution in for respiratory diseases. Next, coming to diarrheal diseases like cholera, typhoid, polio, or rotavirus, again these have got no sex distribution because these are feco-oral in uh, origin. Now, what happens? Male also may consume same contaminated water, and female also can drink this contaminated water, and both have got the equal chances of developing this diarrheal diseases. So again, for any diarrheal disease, if the question is asked sex distribution, say that it is same. Male and female, it is same. No particular variations are seen. Now, there are some questions which I want to ask you. Cataract, is it commonly seen in males or females? Can anybody tell me? Cataract has got a distribution or no? Because it is a geriatric problem or old age related problem which is seen in individuals who are more than 55 years old. Does it have a sex distribution?
No,
Students?
ma'am.
Yes, it has actually,
No.
because it is more in females. Because how it is linked, how we can say is that life expectancy. So generally, when we study, females live for more longer period of time on this planet as compared to that of the males. So lifespan of the females are little bit more as compared to that of the males. So when this is there and this is a age old related problem, so this lady she will live for a longer time, and this male he may not live for a longer time. So this female has got higher chance of developing this old age related problem, and in that cataract is one of the old age related problem. So cataract, it is highly prevalent in whom? Females. Then again, same thing,
Female.
hypertension, if you see, it is again more common in whom? Females. And again, because
Female.
hypertension is again age related, as the age advances, increase risk of developing hypertension. And again, females tend to live for longer span, then again they are more tend to get any old age related problems. Then can you tell me diabetes mellitus, it is more common in males or females?
Males. It
Akash,
is more
Smriti?
commonly found. Male.
Yeah, it
Ma'am,
is
it is
common
more
in
commonly found. Male.
male as compared to that of the
Female.
females, because by default, that is genetically, the males, they are like themselves has got more tendency to develop this diabetes mellitus as compared to that of the females. So this is all like in general about the descriptive epidemiology. So what all we have seen? Time distribution, place distribution, then person wise distribution. Time, place, and person wise
Yes,
distribution.
person.
Now, one common question I want to okay, this I'll discuss it in the next sessions. Now, let me come to the analytical epidemiology. So, this is also a type of what? Observational epidemiology. So, in analytical epidemiology, different types are there. Cohort studies are there, case control, cross sectional, and ecological. Don't get confused that cross sectional falls under descriptive. No. All these are the different types of what? Analytical epidemiology. And one more variety is there, that is called as nested case control study. It is also a type of what? Analytical epidemiology. Now I'll tell you in detail about all this. Cohort study. So cohort study, what does it mean? So cohort study, it is a type of prospective study. So here what happens? Disease has not occurred. We will just look at what the exposed people. So we will just see the smokers and we will just observe them, follow them over a period of time till the smokers develop what? Lung cancer. So my interest is to see whether the smokers will develop lung cancer or no. So this is what we call it as what? Cohort study. It is something like we are doing some follow up is there. So,
Follow up.
like we start with the exposure and then we wait till the outcome is seen. So this cohort study, it just moves in the forward direction. That's why it is also called as forward study.
Forward.
And very important is that here in the beginning no disease, like disease was not present, then I am just waiting for the time till the disease happens. So like when the time like period the disease happens, we call it as what? Incidence. Incidence means what? New cases are occurring. So new
Number
cases.
of
So I'm
cases
waiting
occur.
till the new cases are occurring. So that's why in cohort study I will be able to obtain what? Incidence of the problem. So therefore cohort study is also called as incidence
Incident.
study. Incidence study. Then in a cohort study, what is the important thing is that I'm just trying to check for the outcome. So that's why cohort studies are also called as what? Outcome.
Outcome study.
Outcome studies. So you need to know the different synonyms for this cohort study. It is also called as follow-up study, forward study, incident study, and outcome studies. Then what are the types of cohort study? So when we see the types of cohort study, these cohort studies are broadly classified into prospective studies or prospective cohort. Then after that we have got retrospective cohort. Then we have got mixed or combination or mixed cohort study. So what is the, let us see each of these three designs in detail. So prospective cohort. So how does this study design will be? So in prospective cohort, what I will do, so I'll take two groups. One group where the individual is a smoker, that is an exposed group. Then what I will do, I'll observe this group of people over a period of time. So maybe here 2020 now I am observing these smokers. Then in 2030, so what is happening? I went and again I checked all these fellows. Then I have identified that out of these 100 smokers, what happened? Maybe 10 people they developed lung cancer. 10 people they developed lung cancer. Now this type of follow-up study or forward-looking study, we call it as what? Prospective. Prospective, the meaning itself says that forward-looking. I'm just starting with the exposure where there was no disease. Then I'm just moving ahead in time. Then I'm just again rechecking them to look for whether the individual has developed the lung cancer or no. And similarly, I will observe another comparison group will be there. They are called as non-exposed group. So that means what? They are what? Non-smokers. Here also I take 100 non-smokers. Then I will do the follow-up. And again, these non-smokers, I will observe them for lung cancer. Then maybe out of 100, two people have developed lung cancer. And again, the period is same only, 2030. So now what I will do here, in smokers, 10 people have developed lung cancer. And in non-smokers, two people have developed lung cancer. Now, can you say that the smoking is a risk factor for lung cancer? Yes, we can tell, but we cannot just logic directly say like that. Am I audible, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So to say that scientifically, smoking is a risk factor for lung cancer, I need to do some mathematical calculations. So what are those mathematical calculations? How do I get my results of this cohort study? So one thing is that I calculate relative risk. Second thing
Incident
is I can calculate attributable risk.
attributable.
It is also called as risk ratio. Okay, it is not risk ratio, absolute ratio. Okay, then I can also calculate population attributable risk. So these are the three things which I can calculate using this prospective or any of the cohort study. Now let me tell you what is this relative risk. So relative risk. So relative risk is incidence among the exposed divided by the incidence among the non-exposed. So in the example, if you have seen, for example, out of 100 smokers, what happened? Only 10 have developed lung cancer. So what is the incidence in the exposed? That is 10 divided by 100. That gives the incidence among the exposed. And non-smokers, for example, 100 people are there for non-smokers, and only two of them have developed what? Lung cancer. Now, what is the incidence among non-exposed? It is two people who have developed lung cancer among non-exposed, and denominator will be total number of people under observation, Now students do the calculation. Can you tell me what is the value over here? Akarshan Smriti, can you tell me how much it will be?
5.
It is 5.
Five.
Smriti, did you calculate it is 5? So what is the meaning of this 5? Now how do you interpret? So the interpretation is that smokers has got 5 times more chances of getting lung cancer as compared to that of the what? Non-smokers. So this is what is the what? We call it as relative risk. So when compared to the
Yes.
non-smokers, relatively, there are 5 times the smokers can develop this lung cancer. And this particular relative risk is very important for the clinician because clinicians are more for them the most relevant like what the aspect is relative risk because if they know what is the value of relative risk they can say that if at all 8 is there that means what if a smoker comes then clinician can predict that 8 times this fellow has got higher chances of developing lung cancer. Then what is this attributable risk? Attributable risk is given by the formula incidence among the exposed minus incidence among the non-exposed divided by incidence among exposed and the multiplier is what? 100. Now, how shall we calculate this attributable risk with the same example? So, incidence among the exposed is how much? Same thing.
10.
10 by
10 minus 5.
100 minus then incidence among the non-exposed is 2 by 100 divided by
100.
again 10 by 100. Now you
100.
calculate and tell me how much it will be into 100.
80.
80. 80.
How much it is?
80.
80.
80%. So that means
Mm.
what attributable risk of 80%, what does it mean? That means smoking has
80% of
attributed or contributed to how
smoking,
much? 80% of
80% of all the cases.
all the cases. So smoking contributes how much? 80% of its contribution is there in the causation of the lung cancer. That is what is the interpretation from attributable risk. And rest 20% for, for lung cancer is contributed by some other factors, which later as an epidemiologist I have to find out. So maybe 20% risk factors for lung cancer is by other causes, and 80% is pakka because of what? Smoking itself. And this particular attributable risk is very important for whom? Epidemiologist. So students, are you clear with this?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah, now the third calculation in this cohort study is what? Population attributable risk. So what is the formula for this population attributable risk? The formula is incidence among the total population divided by the minus incidence among the exposed divided by the uh, incidence among the total population into 100. So total population means how much here it will be? It is again 200 it is. Total population is we have to calculate them as smokers and non-smokers. So here total population incidence among total population means we have to calculate it is smokers and non-smokers. Totally the population is 200. So denominator will be 200. Now you see among these two how many they have developed this lung cancer, that is 10 plus 2, that is 12. So incidence among this total is how much? 12 by 200 minus incidence among the non-exposed, that is 2 by 100 divided by 12 by 200. So how much value do you get here? So maybe let us assume that it is again 88%. It is an assumption. So what does it mean? Population attributable risk of 88% means what? It means that if we try to remove this smoking, if we try to remove this smoking from the population, that is we do some smoking cessation programs like whoever smokes we will put some penalty or some legal actions will be taken or ban of cigarettes, all these things. So when some actions are taken publicly, then what happens? 88% chances of reduction in incidence of lung cancer will be there. So when I try to target the smoking by totally trying to remove the smoking from the community, then what happens? There will be 88% reduction in the incidence of lung cancer in the given year. in the given year in that community. So this is the message that is given by this population attributable risk. And this particular PAR, that is population attributable risk value, is very important for whom? Public health officer. Because if this fellow is there and he is in charge to conduct the public health programs, so for him this PAR value is very important. If the PAR value comes as maybe 8%. Now, do you think that it is wise to conduct any program on this 8%? For example, it has shown that 8% PAR for smoking. That means what? If you try to stop this smoking from this community, then chance of reduction of this lung cancer is only 8%. Then what about this rest of the 92%? Still that 92% lung cancer incidence will be there, but its the cause will be something else. So what is the important message here is that this population attribute risk value, if it is more, then better to start with any community-based programs, and such programs will be effective in reduction of the incidence of this particular risk factor or the disease. So clear with the concept here. So now
Yes, ma'am.
cohort study,
Yes,
what we have seen? So cohort study, we have seen three designs are there. One is prospective cohort, then after that retrospective cohort, after that what mixed cohort is there. So prospective cohort already we have seen. It is like one direction, smoker will be there, lung cancer exposure will be. Then what happens here? Lot of time is consumed, and it is very expensive also. Now I don't want to waste so much of time, or I don't have much of time. Now what I will do? The another possible method is that I will what I will do? I will start 2020. I am here at this point of time. Now I will go retrospectively, that is backwards in time. So maybe 2000 I will go. So in 2000 I will go to one hospital and I will check its records. And in that records I find out that maybe there are some smokers and non-smokers are there. So in these smokers and non-smokers, some 100 smokers and non-smokers case sheets I have taken, and then I have traced them. And now again I have come back to 2020. Then in 2020 I will go and meet the smokers and non-smokers, and then I will check out that whether they have developed lung cancer or not developed lung cancer. So this particular design we call it as what? Retrospective cohort. That is what? We are going back in time, then again we are coming forward to the present time. Now by doing this, what is happening? My time I am able to save it, because I'm not wasting my time just following these exposed people over a period of time. So here like time is less consumed over here. So quickly I'll go to the hospital, get the case sheets, look in those case sheets who are smokers and non-smokers, and again I'll take out their address and I will go and meet them at their respective residence, and then I'll check them for the lung cancer, whether they have lung cancer or no. Then by this method I can get to know that whether the smoking is a risk factor for lung cancer or no. So this type of cohort design is known as retrospective. So clear with this retrospective cohort.
yes, ma'am.
Then after this, we have got another type of cohort design is like a mixed cohort. It is also same thing like retrospective. So what I will do 2020 researcher, I am here. I will go back in time. So maybe 2005 I will go, and I will go to one hospital in my area, and I will ask the hospital staff that give me the case sheets of 2005, and I though they have given me the case sheets of 2005. I have read the case sheets. I have come to know that who are smokers and who are non-smokers. Then I have identified the smokers and non-smokers, and I have collected their residential address, and I have followed them, and I have come to my this 2000 only. Then again I will trace them and I will meet them, all those subjects. Then I will check them whether they have got lung cancer or no. Now what happens? Till now it is what? It is a retrospective cohort only. Now I have found that in this uh, 2005 follow-ups, some people have developed, maybe 10 people have developed lung cancer. Now what I felt that this is not enough for me. Now I will follow rest of these 90 people who are there in this case, who did not develop lung cancer for some more time, maybe for another 10 years, that is 2030. So now what has happened? Now again I am just going forward, again prospective design is seen. Now again 2030 what happens? Maybe some more people have developed lung cancer, another five must have developed lung cancer. So this type of design we call it as what? Where there is a combination of retrospective and prospective, we call it as what? Mixed cohort study design. Yes, understood students? Clear with this? So cohort study, students, are you all clear with this? Students,
Yes, ma'am.
so cohort study,
Yes, ma'am.
it is prospective cohort, then retrospective cohort, then again we have got what? Mixed
Mid
cohort.
cohort.
So you need to know the difference between these three. So like this, if the arrow mark is there, then it is prospective cohort. Then here only prospective cohort, what happens? The same thing is there. Here I am there. I will go back in time. Then again I'll come forward like this. Then it is retrospective cohort. Then again the design is like I will go back like this. Then again I will come to this here. Then again I will do follow up for some more time. So this is called as what? Mixed cohort
Mid cohort.
study. So what all we calculate in this cohort study? We calculate what? Relative risk. Then we calculate attributable risk.
Attributed
We calculate
and par.
PAR, that is
PAR.
population attributable risk.
Population
So
attributable
yeah,
risk.
these two attributable risk and PAR, these two are expressed in percentage.
Percent
And relative risk is always a single value. It is a single value. And how do you interpret
value.
this relative risk? So general interpretation is given that relative risk of less than 1, it means that there is negative association or there is a protective association. That means what? For example, protein consumption and cardiovascular disease. So if I have studied this and if I got the relative risk value of less than 1, what does it mean? That it means that protein consumption has got a beneficial effect or protective effect on cardiovascular disease. That means whoever consumes more proteins, they have got less chances of developing cardiovascular disease.
Cardiovascular.
And for example, relative risk value of more than 1, it means what? There is a positive association. For example, smokers and lung cancer. That means who are smokes more or who are smokers, they are got a higher chance of developing lung cancer. Then what about relative risk is equal to 1? That means what? No association. That means what? Smoking is not related to lung cancer. This is what is the interpretation of relative risk. Then after this relative risk, we have got after all this cohort study, then we have got another type of analytical study, that is case control study.
Case
In
control
this case
study.
control study, cases means what? They are the one with
Affected
disease,
individual.
and control means what? The one without
Not affected by
disease.
disease.
So here what is happening is like we are already starting with the people who are having disease, and then we go back in time, like we take the history of these people or these fellows, and then we will ask them like, are you a smoker or are you not smoker? So then we take the history, and then like based on the history, then we can correlate whether this particular risk factor is causative agent for this lung cancer or no. So here two groups will be there. One is case group, another is control group. So control group is like they are the one without disease, but still we take the history for them related to the relevant risk factor. Then we will make the comparison between these two cases and controls. So since we are going back in time, this case control study is also called as backward study. It is
Backward.
also called as what? Backward study. And here we are not able to calculate any incidence, because here already we are starting with what? Disease. So here disease is already present. So that's why we are not able to calculate any incidence. So how do you do the calculation for this case control study? Here we do the calculation using odds
Odd
ratio.
ratio.
What is the formula for odds ratio? AD by BC.
AD
Like here the
BC.
table and all we have to draw it over here. So it is also called as what? Cross product ratio. Cross product ratio. Now, for example, if the odds ratio, if it is 1 means what? This fellow has got like more chances of developing lung cancer, or smoking is like 1 time more linked with the lung cancer as compared to that of the non-smoker. If odds ratio is equal to 1 means what? There is no association. And odds ratio, if it is less than 1 means what? Again, it is a protective effect is there. So in case control study, what do we calculate? We calculate only odds ratio. And what is the advantage with the case control study? It is less time consuming, because what is the thing happening? I will identify all lung cancer patients, then just I will take their history. Are you a smoker or not smoker? Then I will take non without people without lung cancer. Then I will ask their history, like are you a smoker or are you not smoker? So it is just within few some lesser time I can finish my case control study. Whereas cohort studies, it
Okay.
will take lot of time and less expensive also, less expensive. Then another thing is that this case control study, no ethical problems, not much of ethical problems. Whereas in cohort study, what happens? Lot of ethical issues will be there, because initially when I contacted the person, he was just exposed to the risk factor. There was no disease, but I'm letting the disease to happen over a period of time. So what is happening? I'm just watching or waiting till the disease is happening. So definitely it is an ethical issues will be more in relation to that of the cohort studies. Then another important issue is that attrition problem. So what is the attrition problem? That is loss of follow-up. Attrition problem. So which we call it as what? Loss of follow-up. That means what? Since we are trying to track the people in cohort studies for a longer period of time, there are chances that some people may die, or some people may say that I don't want to participate. So they are called as dropouts. So the chances of this loss of the study subjects is high in case of cohort studies. Whereas this attrition problem is not there in case of what? Case control study, because we are not doing any follow-up. We are just going and asking them about the risk factor. What is the maximum permitted attrition in cohort studies? So it is always recommended that we should not have this loss of our study subjects not more than 5%. So always it should be less than 5%. Maybe out of 100 study subjects, it is permitted that 5 people can be dropped out from my study. That means 95 people should be retained in this study. So are you all clear with this? So today
Yes,
what all we
ma'am.
have seen? Descriptive study, time, place, person.
This
So all those kalas
person.
or all those diseases, you have to remember them. Chances are that they can ask you which disease are more common in which place. Then after descriptive study, a part of analytical study we have seen. In that we have seen about the cohort studies. In that three types of cohort studies we have seen, that is prospective cohort, retrospective cohort, and the cohort we have
Mixture.
seen. Then we have seen something about the case control study. So tomorrow, sir will take a class on heart failure and valvular disease. Then after that, I will continue with the rest of the part of epidemiology.
Yes, ma'am.
Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. We will continue in
No, ma'am.
session. Yes. Just go through your books and try to find out the read the communicable disease epidemiology.
Okay, ma'am.
So you'll come to know where and all these distributions are commonly seen. Age wise, sex wise, and time place is are very important.
Hmm.
Yeah. See you all in the tomorrow session. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.